G'day guys, welcome to another Player Focus edition of My Blue Heaven. And as promised and as hinted in my last episode today, I'm going to be focusing on Lochie O'Brien. And very, very excited to bring you this little analysis of a player that we've still got high hopes for. It hasn't quite panned out the way he would have liked, and surely what we would have liked this season, yet to play a game. But I think the fact that he's still contracted for next year, still we hold on to some hope that we're going to see the best out of Lochie O'Brien moving forward. What I like to do with these videos is just try and paint a little bit of a picture, go back in time where they've come from, and just try and give you a bit of an insight. I really enjoyed doing this one, find out a little bit of information about Lochie that I didn't know, and hopefully try and see where he fits into the scheme of things beyond maybe even this year. Hopefully an opportunity arises over the next 5 weeks, but definitely next year in 2021. So first round draft pick number 10, O'Brien back in the 2017 draft, which was the third draft of Stephen Silvani, and another draft where he identified midfielders. The year before it was Fisher and Sam Petreski-Seaton, and the year before that his first draft went tall, obviously with Wiedering and Harry and Charlie Curnow and the like. So this one was identifying some midfielders once again. Paddy Dow, pick 3, and then Lochie at pick 10. Just to round it out, Tom DeConning was taken in the same draft, and also Jarrett Garlett was taken a little bit later on. He's been since delisted. And Angus Shoemaker, who just played the one game last year, he's been delisted as well. A pick 10, it's a high investment, isn't it? A first round draft pick, and it was a pick we acquired through the Bryce Gibbs trade, and Lochie took over the number 4 jumper. Still just 20 years of age, just his third season on the list. So he's still very, very young, turns 21 next month. And physically still young, and probably mentally, emotionally still developing as well in regards to his football. Went through the Bendigo Pioneers, made his way down from Mildura, country lad, all the way down to the Bendigo Pioneers, and was good enough to win a sports scholarship. I'll say sports scholarship because he's very talented in a number of different sports. At Geelong Grammar, prestigious school, who he was schoolmates with Paddy Dow, in the same football team at Geelong Grammar as Paddy Dow, and I think a couple of other players as well. Daniels from GWS Giants, and also I think another boy from the Eagles was part of that team as well at Geelong Grammar. So he was exceptionally gifted cricketer, and also a very, very fine young athlete, particularly at running 400 metres and 1,500 metres, his speciality. I'll get to his athletics just in a minute. His grandfather, Dennis, which I found out, played one game with the Collingwood Football Club back in 1971. Also won a reserve premiership with the Pies, and the family, including Lochie, obviously barracked for Collingwood growing up, and he's played just the one game against the team he supported as a child back in his debut season in 2018. Played the one game against the Pies and picked up the 9 disposals. Let's quickly talk about his athletics career, because he had to make a decision about his athletics career. He's an exceptionally fine runner. I've mentioned 400 metres and 1,500 metres. Broke a state record with a time of 51 seconds back as I think maybe a 16-year-old. And the world record is 43 seconds for men. So he can fly in that regard. But just in regards to his athletics, he did say he did travel and headed to Canada for 3 weeks as part of a development track and field squad. And when he returned, O'Brien ran in the national event and came third in the 400-metre race. So he won the state titles and then came back and came third in the nationals. And he had to make a decision between the two sports. And he chose football from the mere fact that he saw people celebrating wins in athletics by doing a lap by themselves. And he thought, nah, that's not for me. So I actually quite like that. The fact that he identified team sports as the area that he wanted to go. He's contracted to the end of next year, which is important. So still got plenty of time to develop. We have not seen him this year. I'll get to that in a second. Just the breakdown of his games, 35 games out of a possible, I think it's 58 now. First year played the 18 games, debuted in round 4 in that thumping. You'll probably remember that thumping against North Melbourne over in, I think it was in Tassie. Yeah, it was a dreadful night to debut for Lochie O'Brien. Played the 18 games, quite staggering. He played 18 in that first year and then played the 17 last year. Started in round 3, so wasn't considered in the early rounds. So I'll just go back through that. And I want to go back to his debut years as well, just to paint a bit of a picture. And here it is once again, the Bible. So let's have a look at his year last year, because I find it really interesting because he had the two coaches. So under Bolts, he was overlooked in the first 2 rounds, then came in for round 3, right the way through to round 6, where he was dropped for a week, went back, he was an emergency, went back and played in the VFL, came back in for one more game in round 9, then was dropped again under Bolts, then played 2 games in the VFL, and round 11 Bolts was sacked. And then Teague immediately reinstated O'Brien for the remainder of the year and ended up playing the rest of the year and actually showed a little bit under David Teague. So he's in and out of the team under Brendan Bolton and then spent the rest of the season playing with David Teague. But then it's interesting that he hasn't even played this season. But I did notice last week he was an emergency, and he must have been the carryover emergency last week against Gold Coast Suns because he didn't play in the scratch match. So I had to go back to his notes in regards to his form in the VFL. He's been an emergency a few times this year. And this is what Daniel O'Keefe, the development coach, said to him about the game in the scratch match. Or was it 14 against 14? He's been working on his contest work. His outside running is still there, very much there. And he's got that lethal left foot. But his body work is the area that we're really trying to focus on. So and that has been the consistent thing that I've been reading about Lochie's progression this year, the contest work and the body on body work. So let's go back to that 2018 year, his first year, where he played the 18 games. He was not ready. Let's just put it on the table. I'm not saying he was gifted those games because the circumstances were he had to play. And I think he was given a disservice by the football club to get those 18 games in his first season. I think he's one hell of a lucky boy to play 35 out of 57 games because I just don't think he was ready at all in those regards. In fact, if he'd been at another club, a stronger club, like a Richmond or a Geelong, he would have been lucky to play any games in his first 2 years. He might have got a glimpse, maybe one game, possibly 2 games, but I don't think we would have seen Lochie O'Brien at all. And I think he was not afforded a proper apprenticeship at the VFL level or even an opportunity to develop slowly, particularly in regards to the way he plays, which is purely an outside game. So he came in clearly not physically ready, and I don't think he was emotionally ready either to play against men. So let's have a look at the reason why he played those games in 2018 in the first place. This is who Carlton drafted, okay, or got onto their list in 2018 to help these younger players, to let the younger players develop in the VFL. This is who we recruited in 2018. Cam O'Shea, Aaron Mullett, and Matt Shaw. Those three boys, okay, played in 2018 in the same year that Lochie O'Brien had to play, because those three were on our list, okay, and they were putrid, okay? They were absolutely putrid, and they were delisted after 1 year. So we're playing a kid who was not ready because we had three blokes on our list who were just absolutely pathetic. And there's no disrespect to those guys. They just were no good. So he's played 18 games in his first year, and I reckon it's cost him, and it's done more harm than good in regards to his progress. So I'm saying now, 3 years down the track, or 2.5 years down the track, he's serving his apprenticeship right here, right now, this season. So please do not panic the fact that we're not seeing Lochie O'Brien. There's a couple of, look, for sure, it's a concern because guys have gone past him this year. Guys like Sam Philp, who's a first-year player, came in. Why not Lochie O'Brien? There's been no injuries this year for Lochie O'Brien, so why does Sam Philp get an opportunity, a first-year player, but not Lochie O'Brien? Why does Josh Honey come in, another first-year player, but not Lochie O'Brien? And then the big one, I suppose, the one which I look at and go, okay, and they're not alarm bells, but I think Matthew Cottrell coming in would say to Lochie O'Brien, well, this is your spot, mate. You know, the wing is your spot, and we've got a kid who's a rookie, you know, a kid who's, you know, done it the hard way, has come in and he's taken your spot on a wing, and he's got similar attributes to you. He's a running machine, Matthew Cottrell. You know, he works up and back and up and back, and he's got a huge work rate, and he's taken your spot. So do you want to win that spot back off Matthew Cottrell? You're going to have to work bloody hard. And I reckon Lochie O'Brien is a really hard worker. Don't get me wrong. But there's clearly some deficiencies in his game, and that is his contest work and his body work, which the club are not happy at. And they're not going to play him until they think he's actually ready this time. So when I say he's not ready mentally, I don't mean that he's soft in the head. I just don't think at the time he was ready to play against men. And he even said himself the year that he was drafted, when he was playing for the AFL Academy team, that they actually played, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but the AFL Academy in Lochie O'Brien's draft year played against the Northern Blues at Etihad Stadium. So it was the top line kids in the country, including Lochie O'Brien, Paddy Dow would have been part of that team. They were playing a game against our VFL team, the Northern Blues, at Etihad Stadium. I think it may have even been a curtain raiser to our game. And he had an absolute howler in that game, Lochie O'Brien. He hardly touched it. And it was like boys against men. And I know that was his draft year, but he just was not ready, physically not ready to play, and mentally not ready to play against men, and that showed in his debut season. It even showed last year in the 17 games he played last year. Let's get this straight, though, in regards to people also saying that it's a failed draft pick on behalf of Stephen Silvani. I don't think it is. Sure, there's some other players that have been taken after Lochie O'Brien that we may like at the football club. But he was earmarked, and a lot of people said it was a bit of a surprise, you know, predicted to go anywhere between pick 20 and pick 30. He was earmarked for a long time to come to Carlton. They were right into him because of his outside game. He was there to come in and eventually complement the likes of Patrick Cripps, inside player, Ed Curnow, inside player. They'd already recruited Matthew Kennedy as an inside player. They had their feelers into Will Setterfield. They knew, I reckon 12 months out, Sauce knew that he was going to get Will Setterfield to the club. Inside player. Fisher, relatively inside player. Sam Petreski-Seaton. All of, you know, Petreski, Seaton and Fisher, the draft before, have got outside attributes, but they're all ball hunters. So Carlton were in desperate need to find an outside running player, and they earmarked Lochie O'Brien a long way out. He trained with the club. They were talking to him for a long time, and they even said to him, I read somewhere that they even said to them they were guaranteed to take him at pick 10 if the Saints didn't take Hunter Clark at pick 7. So Carlton were actually going to take Hunter Clark at pick 10 if he sort of floated through. But once the Saints got him at pick 7, they said, nah, Lochie, you're our man. So he was always coming into the football club, and I just don't think he's been managed in those early days under Brendan Bolton. And some of the stories I've heard about his football last year really concern me, and these come from pretty good sources. In regards to Lochie playing on a wing, okay, in his preferred position, but being asked, okay, just ridiculously asked to, when the ball was on his side of the ground at a stoppage, that he remove himself from the stoppage and go to the other side of the wing. So whenever there was a stoppage near him, he had to remove himself, to the point of him just being absolutely confused in regards to his role. Now, if these are true, this is just outrageous treatment of a young player, to get him away from the stoppage just because he's not an inside player and tell him to go to the other side of the ground, almost to the point of confusing him. And it wasn't until Teague took over that Teague gave him a licence to play his own game in that regard. And he started to shine just a little bit. It's just the mere fact now that blokes have overtaken him. I've also heard stories that Jack Nunes, that was his man. They were going head to head all throughout the pre-season. Jack Nunes v Lochie O'Brien on their wing, and Nunes, being a physical, mature player, said, oh, I'm going to take your spot, young man. And now we've got Matthew Cottrell coming in with that same type of personality. I'm going to take your spot. So he's just going to have to work to get that opportunity. Finally, I think, look, the strengths are clear, okay? The strengths are clear in regards to Lochie O'Brien. Penetrating left foot. We didn't see it early because he was still developing, but he has got a lovely left peg, and I've watched him at training, and it's getting better and better. I haven't seen it for a while, but pre-season training after 2 years, doing, getting stronger and stronger. His kicking has got the depth and the penetration that we need. His running ability, particularly both ways. Some of the reports are that he's getting back and helping his back 6 and back 7. Even last year, some of the reports of him being able to run both ways has been fantastic. And his clear weakness is his contest and body work. And he doesn't need to have that in spades. Okay, and what I mean by that, we need him for his outside work. But what was clear to me watching him last year and even the year before was him taking his eyes off the ball and being almost intimidated out on the football ground because he just was not ready physically. So I want to finish on this whole concept of, you hear things like he shits himself, Lochie shits himself, he's scared. I honestly don't believe that. I think the whole notion of courage and bravery in football is really misused as a descriptor. So when I hear things like, Joel Selwood is a brave and courageous player, Jonathan Brown was one of the most courageous players, even our own Kate Simpson's one of the most courageous and brave players, is a complete and utter load of bullshit, okay? Bravery and courage in football is not about running into packs and nearly killing yourself, because I reckon if bravery, the correct use of the word bravery is actually overcoming your fears, actually overcoming them, okay? The ability to do something which frightens you, okay? Really, there's a clear weakness there, but you work hard to improve it. Now, I reckon you'd ask someone like Joel Selwood, or even Sam Walsh, or even Kate Simpson, do they think about getting hurt on the football ground? I reckon they'd say no. Would you ask Jonathan Brown whether he thinks about getting hurt? He would say no, never thought about it in a day of my life, and just go out there. But I reckon if you ask someone like Lochie O'Brien, okay, were you intimidated, okay, when you first started playing AFL football? Were you a little bit scared to go out there? There's 100% sure he would have said, yeah, I was, okay? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I reckon there'd be thousands of young kids going out, young players going out and playing football and being intimidated for the first time. And Lochie O'Brien, to me, showed he was an intimidated young player because he was not ready. He was not ready to be playing senior football on a big stage in front of a huge crowd, in front of people who are going to criticise him and analyse him and it just, berate him and criticise him. The club have not treated this young man the way they should have. They should have just been nursing him quietly through the VFL system and letting him develop against men that way. I just think it's been mismanagement at its absolute best. I've still got high hopes for him because we need Lochie O'Brien's attributes. We need players who can run both ways, who can use the football, who are smart. He's a smart young man. We need hard-working footballers. Let's not give up hope on him. Sure, okay, next year becomes a really big year for him. Even if he gets his opportunity this year, it becomes big for him as well. But I'm generally excited to see how he's developed physically, okay, when he gets his opportunity. Does he take his eye off the ball? Does he fumble because he's bracing for contact of blokes that are bigger than him? Or is he confident now in his own body, in his own ability? Okay, so that is Lochie O'Brien, player focus. Let's get him back into the team. I think he's got something. I really do. But he's fighting. Okay, this is where I think he may fit in. All right, this is where I think he may fit in. Eventually, Sammy Walsh will go into the midfield. Okay, he'll go into the midfield. That's the natural progression back into the midfield for Sam Walsh. Then we have your Matthew Cottrell on one wing, and then you have your Lochie O'Brien on your other wing. He reminds me a lot of Collingwood's Tom Phillips. A little bit of Isaac Smith in there as well, if you can get anywhere near those boys. Although Tom Phillips has sort of gone off the boil a little bit, okay, in season 2021. Not quite sure what's happened. 2020. Not quite sure what's happened there with Tom, but he's that similar type player. You need them in your team. You need them on the outside and damaging the opposition. You can't have too many balls trying to win the ball. We need to have, one of our best ever players, okay, in history of the football club was Craig Bradley. Okay, pure outside player. And I'm not saying that Lochie O'Brien's going to be a Craig Bradley, but you need them in your football team. Let us know what you think about young Lochie in the comments below. And up the Blue Baggers this weekend against the Pies.